You are in for an interesting ride.
That I am absolutely delighted to welcome Sylvain Rochon, I hope I've got your name correctly said, to this wonderful, very exciting interview. And I just want to, before we get on to everything else, I want Sylvain to introduce himself, his background, and then we're going to talk about the nature of what this interview is about. It's very exciting.
I live in Canada, so I'm Canadian. I'm French Canadian. My first language is French, second is English, and then I've learned other languages along the way. My education background is biochemistry, chemical engineering, and education. So I have 3 bachelor's degrees from University of Ottawa. I started my career as an educator in high school level and moved on to consulting for small businesses, teaching science and engineering at different levels, as well as starting software businesses. So that's kind of my early career. But since I'm a teenager, in parallel to all this, I've been involved with multiple organizations that are trying to make the world a better place, more conscientious place, and things like that. So I've always been interested into that. And one of the organizations is the Raelian Movement, the Canadian Raelian Movement. I joined the organization when I was 15, so a long time ago. I became active with the activism aspect of the organization when I was somewhere around 24, 25 or so, almost 25 years ago. Okay, so, I mentioned that because we're going to get that relevant to our current project. My profession basically is a futurist. So that's what I do on a professional level. And I run different software businesses and high-tech businesses. And I have not-for-profits like the Canadian Institute of Mass Communication, Intellectua, which is like a futurist think tank. And finally, one of the more recent organizations and central to the conversation today is the Alliance for Extraterrestrial Diplomatic Contact. And in that organization, I'm one of the 3 founders and the vice president of the company as a whole, and also responsible for network development. So in a very short span of time, that's my bio.
So we are here to focus particularly on the Alliance for Diplomatic Extraterrestrial Contact, which I find an absolutely exciting and potentially thrilling project. How did this come about? What was the force behind it? Was it to do with Rael?
It did, because at least we have to think about how ideas emerge, right? And it did come from that, because when I read Rael's books, Rael is the UFO world would be considered an experiencer. He had a direct contact with an extraterrestrial who met several times in 1973. And then met again in 1975. And from those encounters, he wrote different books. And he was given a specific message that had 2 elements to it. Speaking on behalf of the aliens, right? The Elohim, which means in Hebrew, those who came from the sky. That's, you can find in the scriptures. And the Elohim created all life on earth. The prophets, whom we call prophets, including him, were contactees that were giving a message to kind of guide humanity towards peace and harmony and loving each other and that kind of thing at different moments in time. And eventually they'll come back and meet with us, and when we're ready, right? So spread that idea. That was the first task that he was given. The second one was build an embassy, like an official embassy for us to return, because we need humanity to be welcoming and also have an agreement, a consensus among the different nations and populations that they actually want to do that. So you need to actually build a formal embassy. So these 2 jobs was given to him and so forth. So embedded in that first message I read, like when I was 13 years old, was the idea of an ET embassy. So that's what brings us to more modern times. So within the Raelian movement, as it grew and it gained momentum, now it's 130,000 members, across over 120 countries or something like that, with those mandates as a philosophy, as an activist group, as a movement. Please, right?
It would be absolutely wonderful if you could give us a little insight into what the overarching philosophy of the Raelian movement is. We've heard about it. I've heard about it. A lot of people have heard about it, and I've done some research on it, but I'd love, from your perspective as a member, to hear about that, and I think set the ground, the base for everybody else's understanding.
Fundamentally, the ideology of the movement is a movement of peace and harmony and unification, right? Conscientiousness and consciousness, both. The teachings are the teachings from those who have created us, like a long time ago. It's like kind of the clock builder telling us how the clock's built, right? So say, well, this is how you're built. This is how your biology is built. This is how your mind is structured. Like, do these keys, what's called in the books, do these things, and you'll be a happy, productive, and healthy person. So basically, they gave us a green list of things we should be doing and ways of thinking to behave properly. So eat healthy, don't do drugs, stuff that we know is good because we've done the work and the research, and like, oh, don't do drugs, it's going to be good for you, and do drink lots of water. Things like that are very basic. But also there's a concept of meditation and other things like that. On a social level, there's ideologies of how governance should work in an ideal way, presenting us with how it works, how they figure stuff out over millennia, and how they are operating now in an optimal kind of system. Primarily centered to all that is, how should we consider our place in the universe? And how should we interact with each other and everything else in the universe? And in a nutshell, it's all about love. Love in its purest form, as in giving without expecting anything in return. So we're built, and there's actually research that supports this out of Harvard, which I wrote about in my 2018 book, unrelated to the movement, that shows that if we give without expectation, we actually derive more pleasure from it. It's kind of inside our genes, is how we are. And most people who are listening to this will nod, because we've all experienced it. So we're built like that. So the teachings and the ideology of the movement circles around these more biological, physical health concepts, and also the ideology that we're all unique. We all should love people and things the way they are, because it's about giving something of yourself to others without expectation, which includes expectation of behavior, expectation of even acceptance, and everything in it. So it involves the whole universe being kind of unified and equal in all its varied differences, right? Including, of course, alien civilizations.
Yeah, and bringing me exactly to that point, I wonder if you have any knowledge about the genesis of the human race with the Elohim, how that even came about. What was it within them that thought this was a good idea to create another species, or was it not like that? Because I've heard people like Sixto Paz Wells, for example, the Peruvian contactee, speak from his perspective that there are, the population of humanity is way spread over many planets. It's not just here. So is that the same from the teachings of Rael, of the Elohim? How was it that we came about? Was there an initiating spark that came from that? Was there some great idea that said, this kind of species that we are now, where's that from?
This is all explained in the book I mentioned. Like, there is a pretty extensive description as to their mentality, as to why they did what they did, and the fact that the galaxy is filled with life. In a way, like, they call themselves, well, we call them Elohim, which means those who came from the sky, because that's, from our perspective, what happened. They came from the sky. They don't call themselves Elohim because it doesn't make sense to them. Kind of our word for them. In the writings, I would encourage people watching this to go and read the book. It's translated in almost 30 languages now, right? It's been for years. It's called Intelligent Design. And you can find it at rael.org, rael.org. You can download it for free in any language you'd like. And it explains this. So I'm going to summarize it very quickly because there's a lot more details in there. In a nutshell, they consider themselves human. And if you look at the scriptures, like the Bible, you can look at also the Torah and other scriptures. At least it's written there. We were created in their image, right? That's a very famous idea from Catholicism. And in Rael's book, he describes like different sections of the Bible, in particular Old Testament and New Testament. It's like, well, this was romanticized or mysticized, but this is what it means. And on that particular point, it's like, well, that's actually pretty exact. Look, when we came here, we created bacteria, a whole bunch of stuff, a whole ecosystem. When we came to want to build a human, well, we templated ourselves. So that's why you look like us. And they've built humanities elsewhere before they built us too.
You know, we hear about the Anunnaki here on the planet that built this race of people, maybe the modern human, who are mining gold for them to help with their atmospheres and stuff like that. Where does that story fit in with this one?
Well, presumably the Anunnaki are also the Elohim. It's just a different name. Rael's books doesn't talk about the stories surrounding the Anunnaki. I did my own research about them from an archaeological point of view. There's very little information about the Anunnaki that can be found archaeologically, except that they were guides and helpful, and they were numerous. North American Indians had the concept of people that came from the sky and created them, and then one day will come back. The Indian Mahabharata talks about, deities, that were in the sky, created life, and then will come back later. You have this story, Amaterasu in Japan, the pantheon, the Greek and Roman pantheons, the Egyptian pantheons, all talk about personified gods that did things and interacting with human, even had children with them, which we call hybrids in some cases or whatnot. We have compatible DNA. We're so alike. Through the stories, and a lot of it was embellished, some was confused, but essentially it's the same people that interacted with us earlier on and eventually kind of faded out to let us grow on our own and become like kind of our adolescence, figuring stuff out for ourselves.
Was there a specific purpose to them creating us as we are today?
The way they described it to Rael was a group of scientists, just like us. They're, like I said, imagine they're human, they are curious. If they can do something, they'll want to do it. So they've experimented quite a bit in creating life, just like we're using genetic engineering now. We've created the first bacteria of our own. We've created alternate versions of DNA. We did things in the lab, hybridize a whole bunch of stuff and test things out, and we're pushing the envelope. And soon we'll create the first plants, and we'll eventually be able to create a human-like creature biologically, just like the Elohim did way back when. And they're like us. We're created their image. Our behavior is similar to theirs. They created life initially to do these things because they wanted to see if they could, and they wanted to see the outcomes, and they wanted to do things. But if you follow the story that Rael talks about, is that the mentality actually shifted in time. Initially it was more, well, let's see what we can do. And they had some issues on their own planet with some of the creations causing accidents. So they had to move off planet to experiment more freely where there wouldn't be any dangers to the population. It was more initially, it seemed to be more a curiosity, a scientific curiosity to see what they could do. Keeping a long story short, it transformed into a realization that they themselves had been created by somebody else way back when, and they didn't know. But they didn't have any contact with whoever they created us. They learned about it much, much later.
You know where they're from? Have they given you, or anybody, Rael, an idea of which planetary systems they're from? And especially if there was one where there was accidents and they couldn't be on the surface anymore?
They're being intentionally cryptic about it. All we know is that it's very close to Earth. And on a galactic scale, that does mean light years, of course, but yeah. But very close. So we were one of the first ventures out. At that time, they were already able to cross distances between stars quickly. So we're not far. And that was a long time ago. Now they're able to cross the galaxy like within the blink of an eye if they want to. But so they can, probably look at our conversation from their home planet, from their living rooms, if they want to, with the technology they have. Their purpose had changed after they realized they were created. Now afterwards, they kind of felt like this is more than just an experiment. It becomes kind of a galactic purpose. It's like it's kind of a procreating consciousness in a certain form across the galaxy and the universe. So it became a bit of a more heavy metaphysical kind of experiment now, not just a scientific one, which presumably is why, and there's some explanations around that, what Yahweh explaining. Now we're seen more like children, and we serve kind of a place in the cycles that happen of consciousness and civilization in the universe, which is caused by creationism. So civilizations over time develop enough science so that they can be creators themselves, and then it perpetuates that elevation of consciousness across different planets. It became a philosophical level kind of thing.
And do they have a concept of God, this all-pervading consciousness from which everything was created, or is it something different?
No God. They are God. Essentially, they were just, us primitives call them gods because we couldn't understand what they were able to do with their technology. Just like every primitive civilization on Earth now thinks that the Europeans or whoever were gods when they landed on their island. Their religion basically is science, is understanding the universe. And it's much more interesting than what we understand of the universe now, because we're just babies and trying to understand what's going on and how communications happen and how the universe is actually structured. They're able to manipulate things that we can't yet understand.
So is the overlay on the science? Is that how that works? I'm just trying to understand a little bit of another layer here. If there's, the science here is getting us into trouble a little bit, I think.
Well, it got them into trouble too. All discovery leads to multiple applications, and we can choose to apply for good or evil. And sometimes we're also unintentionally going to create problems because we don't understand what we newly discovered. So there's all these variations of trial and error that has occurred, and they've made some doozies. Some of it is explained in some of the books. They do talk about a few things that are relevant to humanity. For example, they made mistakes with us too, and that's also in the book if you're curious about some of the details. And they don't apologize, but they say we learned and then we became better, and now we're wiser. Part of the reason why they sent prophets is to impart some of the wisdom at different moments in time for what we could take. And part of the reasons why they're excited about meeting us finally is that we may have enough wisdom soon so that we are able to take the dialogue, and they're looking forward to imparting more knowledge and wisdom directly in conversation.
I know that Rael talked about in his second 1975 encounter where a robot maybe took a skin cell or something from his forehead, and then suddenly there was the creation manifesting before his eyes of a complete replica of him, a clone, I guess, I think without a brain. So that's also part of their philosophy, I believe.
Well, the International Raelian Movement was born out of these ideas from these books and Rael. And Rael is still around. Like, we're directly involved in propagating these ideas of creation, that we were creating, because that's that first idea. So we're trying to kind of tell people, look, like, we can create life through science. We got to use science to understand. We're going to make mistakes along the way, but we're learning, right? And some bad actors are going to misuse the new learnings, and the bad thing, we're going to try to stop those, and we're going to try to use it for good, like nuclear power being used for energy production and healthcare, as a typical example. Genetic engineering, can be used to destroy civilizations, but it can also, remove all the genetic diseases and so on and so on. So, right. The idea inside the movement is that we have to keep science progressing responsibly, and we will get to eternal life and being able to do clones, being able to manipulate things in the way that's described in that 1975 book ourselves in time.
Yeah. Just going back to the clone idea one more time, I wasn't sure when he was shown that the purpose of it. There wasn't a lot said about it. I haven't read Rael's books, I have to say.
Okay.
Is that for the purpose of when that body dies, there we go, we've got a nice clone of a good age, 20s, 30s, whatever, and his consciousness can be transferred, and maybe his brain, I don't know how it works, into this next container. I say this in real curiosity because I remember Whitley Strieber talking about the Greys. In this case, first book Communion, he was in Fear and Shock, and the other book Transformation, he was finding the love connection. And it seems to be a natural thing. If we can have enough time to assimilate things and enough understanding, then we can come to the love element, which is that very big creative process, I think, that comes from great good intentions. And to the point, a Grey had opened a drawer, if I remember the moment correctly, and there were all these bodies, clones. And it was like a ta-da moment, as I understood that Whitley described it. He was shocked, and I was a bit surprised by that. I thought, oh, okay, so this is something else. I mean, you know, notwithstanding that we've had Dolly the sheep in the UK a while ago, but I'm just wondering, is that the purpose, to continue our lives in these similar facsimiles of containers, and we just pop our consciousness in there?
I don't think that's like a civilization purpose in itself. I think those are ways for us to manipulate our own lives as individuals by choice, because if we're left our own devices, we die at maximum, let's say 120 years, right? And that's it. If nothing gets done, that's the maximum years you get. But you know, you can consider that as an option for medical science. Like we're actually deploying now different treatments that'll elongate that life from 120 years to beyond 150 to 150 years. We're doing it now through senolytics, elongation of telomeres and other techniques that we're developing. You do remember I'm a biochemist, right? So I do follow the science quite closely, and that's something that we'll be able to do. And if the old texts where it refers to like people living like 1,000 years, like Methuselah and Abraham, and from the old scriptures, and so you wonder, so well, that could be all fantasy, just stories and whatever. But if you know those stories, they were actually dialoguing with what they call angels and Elohim. Angel just means messenger in Hebrew. It's a function. It's like, a postman, right? It doesn't necessarily mean like something with wings and anything like that. It's just in most scriptures, it's like they're called sometimes cherubs, which small children, because they are smaller, right? These are all just different words to describe these extraterrestrials, that were mingling with them, and they had a lot of science. They were masters of their own creation. So Abraham and others were able to live very long years because they had access through their own genetics and through expertise to be able to live long. And Rael explained this. Actually, Yahweh explained it in the first book. That was a mistake on their part. Felt that become dangerous for them, for us to have the life expectancy of over 1,000 years, because we were developing quite fast intellectually and without the wisdom to go along with it. So they kind of cut our life short to 100 years instead, and so that we would progress as civilization more slowly technologically. So, and that means that certainly there are ways inside our body to get the 1,000-year lifespan still.
That's great to know.
Using things like cloning, because they said, like, even then, if you solve that, which is great, because the health of a 25-year-old for most of that period, I mean, who doesn't want that? The look and the health of when you were in your 20s. But eventually, the body still falters and die anyway. And that's when the cloning and transference technology comes into play, where you get a brand spanking new 20-year-old body. You got I don't know what the process is. What makes you is transferred over to the new clone. The old clone can die, oof. Then you live another 1,000 years with that body, and so on, unless you die of other causes, of course. That's why Rael spoke with Yahweh, the actual Yahweh, because he's been doing that for thousands of years. He's been transferring bodies. Same person that led the teams that created life actually spoke with him, because they have that technology. They created us. They can clone themselves. So that's something that we will eventually have access to thanks to science and understanding. And in the meantime, well, we're figuring stuff out as we go.
Interestingly enough, in Russia, there is a very interesting guy, a couple of guys, Arkady Petrov and Grigory Grabovoy. I don't know whether you've come across them. And he is an engineer, Grabovoy, I'm talking about particularly, and a person who was born with incredible psychic faculties, but also just came in with a lot of knowledge. And I don't know what age he is now, just to give a reference point, he may be 50 or 60, something like that. And he is teaching cell regeneration, organ regeneration, all of this kind of thing. And back in 2005, Arkady Petrov has an institute and follows the Grigory Grabovoi work. And there were people who were talking about the regrowth of a lung, of a womb, of a leg that was about to be amputated through gangrenous conditions, growing teeth. And Grigory Grabovoi says that, and these are technologies, these are sort of mental technologies working with the mind, harnessing the matrix of life, I guess is the best way I can describe it. For example, one of the women who had regrown her womb, which she'd had removed as a diseased from her 30s, in her 60s regrew it and had the scan, had the evidence, all the rest of that. And she said it took about 4 months. And there was a slight electrical feeling along with that, not at all unpleasant. The same with the people who'd regrown a lung through TB issues, through teeth, and that kind of thing. And Grabovoi says you can extend your life because death is not where it's at. It's actually, we're not meant to die the way we do or we have been. And this is different. And this is on this planet right now, here as we speak. And he's teaching these days. So I don't know whether he might be in touch or have come from those kind of beings. It's a different process to what you're talking about, because they're talking about using, not manipulating, well, it is essentially manipulating the cell structure, but it's through the mental process. I've just looked into it. I've done some reading. There are 3 books about all of that called The Light of the Universe. And there's not a lot out there about it, but it's fascinating stuff. I'm just going off a slight tangent now, but I think it's interesting. People who have met the Ascended Masters or people who've passed on, they often talk about those beings and the Ascended Masters as looking in their prime, 20s or 30s, with the most incredible, energetic, I don't know, radiation coming from them, you know, as if that all of that energy of life and wisdom is there manifest. So I believe it's absolutely possible. I'm just, you know, the mechanism of Grabovoi, I'm very interested in that, and maybe I'll be able to access that one day. So we have different mechanisms here, some different methods, and I'm sure that at some point they're linked, but it is through the process overarchingly with love that is the actual linchpin of it all.
There is, speaking as a scientist here, we have ways inside the body to regenerate. In fact, similar genes that we find in lizards that, you know, when they lose their tail, they regenerate the tail. We have those genes. We actually do regenerate. You know, when you lose a little bit of body, not like whole organs normally, and like most people regenerate that piece, like the skin, or we have these mechanisms embedded into us. And some people regenerate better than others. I mentioned like the Elohim nipping us in the butt, like bringing our longevity from 1,000 to 120 at some point. Like, it's described as a simple operation to fix. That implies, at least for me as a scientist, that we have all the mechanisms inside us in our genes to actually live that long. We know we can generate stem cells. We actually do, but over time those stem cells diminish. If we can fix that diminution, then we can, and that's the research around aging. That's what we're discovering, and that's where we're finding fairly easy treatments to actually resolve some of these issues. Also, when we get to meet our creators at the embassy, so they're going to say, you know, we understand everything about you. Maybe you're at a time where we can teach you a bit about how you are, so they don't need to go through all these steps of discovery. Here's something else that can help you be healthier, make us go through a leap. The concern is always about misuse by the population.
Do we have an idea when it would have been that we were brought into commission?
I like the analogy to robotics, because it's not that dissimilar, because creating an AI with a robot versus creating a biological intelligent being, what, 13,000 years ago? Or was it 25? It's been a while since I've talked about that, but yeah, it's a number of thousands of years ago they came here. The one piece that most scientists miss when you look at geology and you look at bones, because we're talking about thousands of years for civilization, right, is that you have to take into account that there was a civilization that actually terraformed. We're actively terraforming here for that time. And when we calculate bones, how long they've been in the ground, we don't assume that there's been a terraformation effort ongoing. This group of scientists are 25,000 years more advanced than we are.
You know, I was seeing the little babushka regrow her teeth. If those folks can do it, it's not that difficult. It's just the application and getting our head around the fact that we can actually do this. So that brings us nicely to the embassy. Do tell us all about the embassy. What is this? This is an initiative from the Raelian Movement.
Right. So 1974, Rael had a few months after his first encounter. It's like, okay, let's start, organizing this. So he started raising funds in 1974 with people that were excited about what message he got from Yahweh and the Elohim, and a small group initially. Because he was just in France, just going on talk shows and radio, and showing the book to people. It's like, hey, this is what happened to me, and so on. You can still find some recordings from way back then. We started raising donations, because you got to start somewhere, and we've been raising donations in the movement since then, and we're still raising money now with the volunteers that have chosen to give money, both through the organization for activities and whatnot, because it's entirely volunteer based. We don't have a building or any salaried people on purpose. We are staying away completely for anything like that. So it's all volunteer raised, but it is one of the two fundamental missions, right? So for years, the movement itself as an organization has been soliciting political figures, diplomats, about the idea of the embassy. So don't worry about, we're not trying to raise funds. We just want to be able to be part of that game and make that embassy. ETs eventually will come. Officially, we need to get organized around a central location for us, for our purposes.
So can I just say, just for clarification, that this project is about building an embassy for ETs where they will come and land and have interaction with humanity. And this will be a large place which will be open to the public, that will perhaps even have other structures or dwellings around. So it is going to be a real incredible location where everything is catered for, and these beings who do come and visit this embassy, in fact, will be owned by them. And wherever this embassy is going to be located, we'll come to that in a minute, that will be accessible to every nation on the planet.
This is an official embassy according to the Vienna Convention, according to international law, basically, that manages diplomatic relations between nations. So it's at the same level as this, right? It needs to be, because we're greeting another civilization that is as important as any one nation. And because it's so seminal to us as humanity at first, one could say that's even more important because it's a meeting between two civilizations. We have to agree that these are the rules between us. They're watching us. They've been they can come down at any point in time, and they have been visiting for a long time and talking to people individually. So the embassy is like an actual embassy. That means it is on extraterritorial ground. That means it's the land that's given by the nation and where it's housed, in this case, nation that's not on Earth. So the land around the building and the building itself belongs to the ET civilization. It doesn't belong to anyone on Earth. That has to be given by the nation that has the land. That means that building, just like any kind of embassy, has rules, and you can't just waltz in there. Security, egress and egress, because we want this to be a secret place. There's the embassy. There's going to be a wall around it, about 1 kilometer away from the embassy proper. It's a very isolated building, but we'll be able to see things come up and down plenty, because we can have cameras, all that stuff too.
You know what acreage it's going to be set on?
I don't remember the exact number, but it's over 400 acres. It's 1 kilometer away from each from the building. So and there's that fence. So there's 2 points of entries. There's water, so that's why we put down the pool. There's plans, of course, a small landing pad, and there's requirements around the building, like 12 units as a SAS, like for access and to change the atmospheres, because they don't breathe exactly the same atmosphere as we do when they come with their own bodies, so to speak. Around that, then there's a small village, because you have to maintain this place anyway, right? Some people have access that are vetted, just like a real embassy. They have access. They're not troublemakers, security checks, all that stuff. And there's going to be a duplicate embassy outside that is going to be touristic. Okay, so you can see a duplicate of the embassy. We don't want to have millions of people visiting the embassy proper. It's a place of business. It's a place for diplomats to meet. Convention center, theater, restaurants, condos, everything. Because people need to be there to manage the whole thing. People need to be there to gather, to manage the tourism, all that stuff. So the nation that accepts the ET embassy also inherits the commercial benefits of having the only embassy on Earth that's designed, legally vetted by the United Nations to do diplomatic missions with an extraterrestrial civilization, because the building and the land itself belongs to them, to the ETs. It's not just a building in some field somewhere in Nevada. And that's why we need also we need a convention, and the UN need to accept it, and different protocols for the Vienna Convention.
How far along is the project with the UN accepting this as a reality?
We are discussing with them. We have conversations, and we're moving things along with different diplomats. There's ongoing initiatives with multiple people, including in some cases with me directly, but it's mostly the president, Daniel Turcotte, who's handling those discussions. There's also discussions with multiple nations for extraterritoriality and being host nations. Those cannot be revealed, those nations that are in discussion for confidentiality reasons, but they have been discussing since 2009.
An idea of timing of this? Is there a cutoff date where this is it? Have the Elohim said, okay, we really need this embassy up and running by?
Well, here's the indicators. And there's a lot of flexibility with it, which is great, because it's massive endeavor. Rael has been saying for years and years and years, so it's going to be between 2025 and 2035 that we'll meet. You can't put down a date, because it's not like they're providing us with a date. We're coming then no matter what. No, they're coming when we're ready. And that's subjective. And by ready, what they mean, build the embassy, have a consensus to actually build the thing. And secondly, like, we need the conscious of the planet to be at a certain level. Like, we can't be fighting each other constantly and things like that, right? So there's a raising of awareness and love on the planet. They're looking for where they think, okay, I think that's a prediction between 2025 and 2035. Now, the rollout plan, the technical pieces, like we're now in 2022, according to our plan, which you can find on our website, the Alliance4ET.org website, right, is that we're going to be finishing, we hope to be finished with the diplomatic shenanigans by the end of this year, maybe next year. And we've been working in parallel with our team of architects on fresh blueprints, and we need to do the country is identified and formally set, which maybe in 2023, the nation decides when they go public with this, right? So we can start looking at like sites, the feasibility studies. These things take a while, right? Because it's a big project, it's a lot of land. According to our plan, the embassy would be open by 2030 or on 2030, ready for business. And then basically we wait. Like, we need to be ready. But that's one thing. Opening it means, okay, that step is done, check mark, right? Okay. The UN's on board, the nation's on board, we got the embassy according to spec. And now it's like, are we ready as a civilization? They get to decide when they come, not us.
And who is this embassy for? I mean, I imagine, like the Elohim, there are myriad other civilizations out there. Is this going to be just for the Elohim, or are they going to be allowing other interests to come and say hello to humanity, or not?
And there's two perspectives for this. One is the purely Raelian perspective, and the other one is the Alliance's perspective. And we haven't talked about this because we didn't talk about what's the difference between the two. And so let's start there, and then I'll answer your question. In 2000, I think it's 2020, I think we're early last year, me and Danielle, the president, we were talking as Raelian members. We have this project has been ongoing since 1974. This needs to be an international project. It's for humanity. It's a gift for humanity. It's something that we're doing for everybody. But we've been running it since 1974, right? So, well, the movement is doing a lot of different things. It has two missions, the embassy plus everything else, right? So, well, if we want to give this to everybody else, we have to be inclusive. We have to include every other organization inside it to all work together alongside, not for, but alongside the Raelian movement, because it's something for everybody. So that's why we created the Alliance. The Raelian movement is the first member because it's the promoter and it's the project, right? And then we built the Alliance as a separate organization, as a Canadian not-for-profit. And then we started inviting organizations to it to support it and bring other assets. Like the movement has done a lot since 1974. The money is there, a lot of the work, a lot of the assets, like people, develop expertise, architects, diplomatic envoys, all that stuff. But then you got groups that do CE5, groups that elevate consciousness, the groups that do what you do, Joanna, right? That kind of talk to people and kind of socialize ideas, and people that do media, and people, ufology groups. We want everybody to feel like they're included and to bring it, because we're volunteers as movement members, we're volunteers as Alliance members, we're also volunteers. We want the embassy to be built. We want humanity to benefit from what's going to come from it. That's the only purpose. The Alliance's purpose is that. So now we have 16 organizations, and we're supported by over 500,000 individuals, and the group is just growing because it's everybody. A lot of people are excited about being in on the project and helping out, getting their hands dirty, so to speak, and also joining in, because a lot of organizations have been also doing amazing things for years too, just not building, the building like what the movement has been doing, but then combined, then it becomes a beautiful, like massive project with all over the world, lots of people. Now, to answer your question, now that that's been explained, and welcome to the Alliance, anyone out there. From the Raelian perspective, because of the books and Rael, what we're looking for is the Elohim that will come, because that's what they asked. These are the people that specifically asked Rael and gave those plans. So from a Raelian perspective, it's clear that's specifically group. From the Alliance perspective, we widen that perspective, because really, let's just build the embassy. We don't know who's going to come. From an Alliance perspective, just one is going to do. Like we're going to happy with one. Let's start with one. Whoever comes, we're going to be ecstatic, right? It's going to be fine. If it's the Elohim, the way they describe in the book, great. If it's something that looks different, great. That's fine. Those are the two perspectives, and Raelians are really on board. Like the same thing. Like the belief is that it's that specific group that's going to come. The Alliance thinks, well, whoever. Let's be welcoming.
I mean, I'm imagining that the whole idea of the embassy is not only going to be a place for business. And when you say business, I'm imagining that there might be diplomatic relations opened up about, travel, about, the economy in space, about, how we may develop and move further there, as well as education, as well as teaching us maybe more about health and well-being. That's a huge thing. So many people are not well. I've heard about the med beds, that kind of thing. I don't know whether that's been spoken of amongst the Elohim, but certainly things, again, just popping back to Grigory Grabovoi, if you can start regrowing organs and we can get to that level of ability, which it seems that some people can. I haven't paid enough attention yet, but I've done some research on it. It could open all manner of gates for us, and it will be interesting to see where it will take the orientation of humanity. And it's interesting that you're in Canada spearheading this, because I know that Canada was one of the first, or perhaps the first place to open a landing pad.
So somewhere in the West, yeah. Yeah, the weather becomes a problem as we understand it in the UK as well. Like, if you're going to build an embassy, you might as well build it somewhere that's going to be comfortable for the visitors. More tropical areas is probably warranted, or at least very temperate, like in southern US and many places in Europe would be fine. Any nation that agrees to the terms will build.
We're not going to be too far away then if you say that it's likely, perhaps a year or just over a year that we might know the decision of the location to start building.
Again, we don't control that timeline. That's the assumption. Once we know, and we are in contact with diplomats and leaders of states, that's going to be an official announcement from that nation too. It won't be just us announcing as a separate organization.
An incredible media event.
How will it be received depends on all sorts of factors on an international level, but it'll be an official announcement. And then there's going to be probably a flood of interest in that particular nation surrounding that particular project, as it should, because it is a seminal moment. We know, and many scientists agree, that we are being watched and visited. The Disclosure Project or the reveals have shed some light on a lot of officially unexplained things that we don't understand.
You or any of the group or the Raelian Movement having instruction about what the building must comprise of, what the structure must include, that kind of thing. Yeah. Where are you getting those kind of details from?
Well, there's some details in the original message, 1973 and 75. Those books contain just the core thing. And it's not a lot. This fence, distance from it, number of entrances, number of cells, like rooms, basically, landing pad, water, and the rest of the design is basically left to us. And there's been an interesting, can't say if it's a real thing, but it suspiciously sounds like a confirmation, because when we created the original design, which is you can see it behind me, you have it looks like a donut with ping pong balls on on a tunnel. When we came up with this and we officially got it accepted by Rael back in the day, and it became like a reveal inside the organization. A couple of days later, this pattern appeared as crop circle in England. And we got wind of that. It's like, wow, what does it mean? Does it mean like thumbs up? We don't know. But that was kind of a curiosity. We don't really know. We assume that many crop circles are made by ETs. And that certainly makes sense based on the data provided for many of them. We have plenty of them in Canada too, the crop circles.
Yeah. The symbol is interesting as well, isn't it? Because somebody, I think, interviewing Rael some years ago said, oh, that was the actual symbol that was on the outfit of the Elohim there. And of course, that symbol was usurped or used by different factions for their own reasons.
Yeah, the symbol of infinity is ancient. Yeah.
Let's go on now to the conference. There's still I'll tell you one more question I'd like to ask you. Does the Elohim have any relationship with Jesus? And I mean, a prophet. Some may say he was a prophet. Does he have any links with these Elohim?
Yeah, in the West, Jesus is a prominent figure, historical figure and religious figure. Definitely, you got plenty. Eli, Moses, Joseph Smith, Jesus, Muhammad, Buddha. These and the Zoroaster, you can name many. There's like 40 of them throughout humanity that were either contacted or put in place in some way, in different ways at different moments in time. And Jesus was one of them. If you look at the history, at least what remains of it, and there's plenty of archaeology beyond the actual scriptures themselves. And so there are some researchers that actually looked at texts that are found that talk about Jesus and whatnot in his stories as well. If you look into that, it's said that Jesus was born from a mother who was a virgin, right? That's part of that story. And he was visited by Angel Gabriel. Angel, like I explained earlier, angel means messenger. Gabriel is a name, but in Hebrew, what's interesting with the archangels, as they commonly call them, all their names finish with El, E-L, all of them. Michael, Gabriel, Uziel, and so on and so on. El means of the Elohim. It's kind of like a suffix that's being used, so that you have a name of the Elohim. So messenger, so-and-so of the Elohim, right? And And Jesus says in the stories that he speaks to his Father. According to what Yahweh told Rael, that's actually accurate. Jesus genetically is part Mary and part Yahweh. Now, I don't know if they actually had sex, if you would. Like, we don't really know that, and it's not really explained explicitly, but definitely it's a merger of genetics.
Can you give us a definition of Yahweh for people who may not know?
Oh, yeah, Yahweh in many texts is considered like transfer Yahweh and convert it to God. Elohim is also often translated into God. Elohim is plural, but it's often transferred to God. So whenever you read in a scripture about God saying something, that's usually Yahweh. It's an actual person. He was there. He created. He's the creator. He's the leader of a team. Like, he's not alone. It's Elohim. There are many of them, but he's the leader. So he's often prominent. But there are others. Lucifer is another Eloha. Satan is another Eloha. They have different opinions about humanity and whether or not and how they should deal with them. And that's part of the stories. Just like the old gods, right? There were many, they had different opinions, they didn't always agree. And that's where the stories come from. And you can have sometimes interactions between the two, and you hear about how they differ in opinion. So Yahweh is that person, but he's just a person, just very advanced. He's been in many bodies. He's been in existence for 25,000 years plus. So you can imagine the knowledge and wisdom of that person, but he has a certain personality. In a broad sense, he's human. We were created based on him. We're taller, and you know, the biology is not exactly the same, since we were adapted for Earth. So the atmosphere here, they have slightly different, you know. So essentially all prophets are either hybrids or they were chosen and given a message at a certain point in time. They're not all hybrids, like the story of Jesus and Rael. Rael is another example of a hybrid. He never knew his biological father. His mother doesn't know who he is. She doesn't know where he came from.
Oh, really?
She was pregnant one day, and so like didn't understand how.
I just wondered if the group, either the Alliance or even the Raelian Movement still, if they have open contact with the Elohim. Is there a kind of an open channel? Is there information that comes? Do you all do CE5 kind of things? I think
Rael does receive the annual little blip, and very rarely, like that happened, I think twice since 1975, that he's received telepathic messages to do certain specific things. Very, very rare. And the yearly thing around, like in the summer, is basically just kind of a number. It's not even like a dialogue. So the contact is very minimal in his case. He just hammers on his very specific mission. And even in an earlier interview, and I saw this fairly recently, so talking to a journalist in France, is like 1977 or something like that. And the interviewer says, well, are there other aliens out there? And also, are there other people that get contacted like you, right? Because we are surrounded by experiencers, like in our network, right, with the Alliance. So the question comes up. But he answered that question based on his knowledge at that time. And I'm paraphrasing here. It says, well, yeah, there are many others. But as far as I know, I'm the only one that has this specific mission, that this is my job to do this, to build the embassy, and you know, to kind of tell people about creation itself. But he says that there's a lot of people that are in contact, or being contacted, that in the past and in the future, in his perspective, just not for the same job. That's all. Like they have a plan for us, and they're kind of guiding us in different ways, like little strings. He has a specific job, and others have other jobs, but it's not his purview to know the other jobs. He's got his own thing. So he gets his contacts once in a while, and that's his experience. And there's the organization that facilitates, help to deliver the mission that he was given. And he's quite happy with the alliance, as we do. Like I don't speak with him directly, but Daniel does on this, and he's happy with all the other organizations that are there that want the meeting to happen. And many of them are also contactees, and he's or telepath mediums. He prefers the word mediums. He's quite happy to help them out, to encourage all this activity, because it's about creating that love right on the planet, and that unicity. And that's a big piece of the of greeting ETs. And this only happen if the whole of humanity is engaged, not just one group with a specific mission and the other group with, like this group maybe, because you have a lot of contactees with specific missions. Like, it's not only Rael, right? We're all kind of working together to elevate humanity and bring awareness, I think. And so the alliance is, for when me and Danielle spoke about it to create it, it's like it's a means to actually find a way to network with everybody that's trying to move the piece in the same direction. Yeah. And get that meeting. And once we get that meeting with ETs and diplomatic missions, who knows what they're going to come with? Who knows what they're going to say? But they are wise beyond our wildest dreams. I'm sure whatever they provide us will be helpful, and whatever they don't provide us is going to have a purpose to not providing it. And we'll start a dialogue, and it'll transform our society forever.
Okay, well, that sounds amazing. But let's talk about the first conference that you're holding in October this year.
Yeah. The conference, October 6th, 2022. It's going to be an online conference, 4 hours. We're keeping it a bit modest, organized by the Alliance. So all our organizational members are going to participate. They'll have quote unquote virtual tables, so people can be aware of who they are, what they do, because there's wonderful activities from all the memberships. And we're hoping that it's going to gather other interesting individuals and organizations into the fold to help humanity get into that seminal moment. And we'll be presenting during that conference. It's going to be like illegal experts, because it's about that moment, right? It's about creating the embassy. So building it, how it's going to be built, what are the blueprints? We've created new blueprints this year by the architects, brand new, and it's beautiful. We'll do teasers. We'll show you bits. But the architect, the lead architect, and Danielle will be there, and myself. But definitely we'll have blueprints, walkthroughs in 3Ds to show the embassy. We have an amazing speaker that's going to come. His name is John Levy. He's an international lawyer, like international law. And he knows the project very, very well. He's going to talk about the legal implications of this and what's going to happen on the legal sense. Like, because this is something we've never done before. What does it look like on international scale legally surrounding the UN and things like that? And we're going to have other speakers. I'm going to be there. Alan Steinfeld, which I'm sure you guys know from that wrote Making Contact. Preston Dennett is going to be there, who's a researcher and a prolific writer on the topic. We're going to have some music, entertainment that inspired by how we're going to be feeling. We're going to have you there, of course. So it's meant to be kind of a celebration of where we are, like as a civilization, a networking event so that people can connect and get to know each other, and also a reveal of information about the nuts and bolts of the embassy. We're going to allow the people that are there at the embassy to also participate in Q&A live, to ask questions and get an example question could be like, can I buy a condo near the embassy? And the answer would be, yeah, you will, because this development project and developers will be involved, and they want to make a model out of it in the tourism. So there's going to be living spaces even near the embassy for those who want to jump in and do that, and stuff like that. But we'll be able to answer basically any question that comes from it. And we're going to make it an annual event, so that each year we can update the whole world in a party setting. Hopefully, maybe physically at a physical location in 2023, to celebrate where we are and what we're doing and what the plans are at that time. So it's going to be an amazing event. We can post the links, and even we have a discount code for those who are interested at this time, which is ETDC 2022 in caps. So ETDC, Extraterrestrial Diplomatic Conference. Basically, that's what the acronym is. And you get to the 35% off any price if you use that code on checkout on Eventbrite. So I'm welcoming everybody to attend. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a lot of really exciting information. We're going to keep as much information as possible under wraps until then. So it becomes kind of an exciting moment of reveal. That moment. Until the extraterrestrials arrive, then the conference is going to change probably to something a bit different at that point. Join in, like the Alliance is welcoming. We have a new group that's out of Russia right now. A group of scientists that started in the 1990s talk about the ethics of the cosmos, about how to engage with other civilizations in the rational way. Treating space not as a property to own, but as international waters, some form. It shouldn't belong to any one nation at all, because we're not alone in the galaxy. This space is not something to own. We're gathering organizations that are thought leaders in the field that feel strongly that we have to move towards a galactic civilization type of orientation. And every indicator shows that the population is more and more ready for this every year.
Is there a particular percentage, do you think, that's a tipping point?
Tipping points are funny, but they are calculable. You can calculate them. There's actually research about this. When you have like 5% of a population, and the population in this case would be the planet in this case, right? When you have 5% of the population believing in something, a concept, let's say ETs visiting here in peace, let's use that. That percentage is enough for that message to trend towards more popularity, towards a shift. A tipping point occurs when you're reaching around 20%. And then that's when things happen very quickly. When you get to 20% of acceptance of an idea, then you can go from 20% to 80% within a very short amount of time, because you just got there's a lot of ideas out there, and 20% is a big chunk of an idea, right? And that circulates. And then you got a lot of people that kept secretly the idea in themselves. Then they feel comfortable enough to say, "Me too. I think this is real." And then they can come out of the walls, right? Like people come up with their ideas. So you see that shift when you hit that 10, 15, 20% mark. Then you see a major shift in mainstream everything.
What do you think we're around about now? Do you have an idea yourself?
Costa Macreas of ET Let's Talk, one of our members, and you know him, is a lovely man. We work closely together. He did a check off of statistics where you have about 1.3 billion people that right now believe that ETs exist. That's a start. And that they are friendly. That's off of surveys. Like people willing enough to say that. That's a pretty big chunk for that specific question, that they are friendly and they exist.
Well, that's more than 20%, isn't it?
No, that's correct. Is for friendliness and existence, and you can see the attitude of that particular piece changing almost monthly.
Yeah. I notice it. I notice it when I talk to people.
Yeah.
I broach the subject because I talk about it anyway. I don't care what people think. I just say, and this, and they go, "Oh yeah." I'm quite surprised that I'm not challenged by the fact by the legitimacy of what I'm saying, that there are ETs.
Just 2 years ago, I was getting completely different attitudes from people. And that's why we created the Alliance when we did, because we felt that change in attitude that was shifting regarding just ETs in general, right? Being friendly and being existing. And we felt, okay, like that's when we need to bring this to the world. Like it can't be just like one organization that that taking care of things. No, it's everybody. And it's been a joy because there's a lot of openness in discussion with normal people, not contactees, experiencers, just normal people, your neighbors. You ask them the question. And most of them have thought of it, they've heard of it, and their mind is kind of like cogitating and saying, yeah, I don't know, why would they be aggressive? Like it kind of making sense on their own. And it's kind of, this shift is happening. So it's very easy to imagine during that shift, or when it ends the shift, if you would, to say to get people to say, including politicians, because they're hard, because they follow exclusively popular opinion. It's like to get them to say, well, how about we agree on building an embassy?
Yeah, I think
the population agrees that they're friendly and they exist. So why don't we build an embassy? And then they feel comfortable in public to say, good idea, let's do that, yeah. Right? And that's when the UN and all this stuff that we're working on actually activates. And we've been connecting with the UN under the Raelian Movement for years, never a response. In 2019, 2020, they've been answering. That we've been chatting with them. They've been telling us how to go through the process and how to get a convention going and how to do under this plan. That's because of that shift. Now they think it's important, it's worth their time. It's worth their time. So we are moving forward with it.
Yeah, and I noticed on the Alliance Facebook page, actually, there's, and again, another Canadian, Larry Maguire, who's an MP for Manitoba, who's publicly saying, okay, let's have a little bit more transparency. Let's talk about this. That's, a regular politician. So I think that's, again, just another indication that some more people are coming on board.
That's the whole shift, and it happens quite quickly. Quickly doesn't mean days, and of course you're talking about months, but it's still quick. So our timeline actually holds. Like because it's shifting so quickly, we do think we'll get a lot of the political diplomatic stuff done by the end of next year.
Are you canvassing just the UN, or are you canvassing, or as well, individual countries? Are you writing to the governments? Do you do anything like that? Or do you have anybody in any countries that are pegged in there and they talk to the government?
The Alliance has contacted every nation on Earth directly.
Independently, okay.
Individually, yes.
Individually, yeah.
Yeah, individually. We've gotten a lot of different responses and sometimes no responses, it depends. We have confidential discussions, like off the books, if you would, with a lot of different politicians that don't want to show themselves in public, but they agree. We have lists for that, which we keep confidential, very confidential for the audience out there, even though it may not be you see the politicians being very formal and kind of avoiding the subject and all that stuff, like openly. There's a lot of back discussion. There's some people here in Ottawa that are connected in politics quite deeply. And there's a whole network of people in politics that talk with each other about this very subject in private, like a club. This is here in Canada and the States. That's how I'm aware of it, because I know some of the ins. There are discussions, plenty. They're just concerned about the popular opinion and their careers if something like that kind of reveals. So they're kind of biding their time until that kind of the tipping point kind of shifts enough so that they can come up and say, this is my plan, this is what I think, and come out the superhero, right? And that's fine. If they want to be the hero, the Alliance and its members don't have an ego. We just want the project to happen so that humanity can benefit on all levels, and somebody else can take the credit. It's not a problem to us. Okay. Somebody else can take the credit. They just take it.
Let's if you can give us the website, the conference details, and the Facebook details as well, and any other details you think we need to know about.
Yep, I would suggest to people want to know about the Alliance itself. It's Alliance4et.org. So for the number 4 inside the URL. For the conference, it's the same URL, but it's conference2022.alliance4et.org. But you can get there from the Alliance website as well. So that's pretty easy. For Facebook, just look for our name, Alliance for Extraterrestrial Diplomatic Contact. You'll find 2 pages. One is a public page where it's just information, and we do have a private group for people that want to join a group and have like more of a group discussion. So that's much more intimate and sharing of information between organizational leaders and whatnot in that group. So we use Facebook quite a bit because many people do use it. I would encourage everybody, if you like that platform, go there. If you want to volunteer, you can contact us directly through the website, any one website. You can register into newsletters from the websites as well. You can buy your tickets directly on the conference website if you want to benefit from the early bird and the coupon code to save your seat and save your space. And if there are organizations out there or individuals of influence out there listening to this, that want to support visibly the Alliance, that is beneficial because we're talking with politicians, and bigger numbers, more organizations mean they want to listen to us more. Be brought in, you can have your link advertised onto our website as a partner, and you'd be invited to the conference and have a table there and all the sorts of benefits as well. And when we start, when the project starts selling condos, you may be contacted first. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent. Well, Sylvain Rochon, thank you very, very much for your time. Really appreciate it. And I can't wait, for one. I am so excited to get this embassy up and running and can't wait to meet the Elohim.
So do I.
Perhaps even
Can't wait.
All right, Sylvain, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye for now.